Up next on U.S. Bank BusinessWatch, presented by the Cincinnati Business Courier, a possible makeover for a familiar downtown Cincinnati landmark. Another new restaurant is coming to the banks. And Cincinnati State is preparing students to work in the growing biotech workforce. U.S. Bank BusinessWatch is next. Good morning and welcome to U.S. Bank Business Watch. I'm Brian Patrick. On the front page of the Business Courier this week, a big change may be coming to downtown Western and Southern Garage, that building topped with the iconic rotating clock. Eagle Realty Group, a subsidiary of Western and Southern, is considering a rehab or tear-down rebuild of the 850-space garage located on Broadway. Here's a look at the building with its rotating time and temperature visible from Fort Washington Way. If a new garage is built here, this would be the second massive downtown garage project for Western and Southern. The Cincinnati-based financial firm is partnering with the city to build a $20 million, 1,200-space garage at 7th and Culvert Streets later this year. The Broadway garage is still in the planning stage and would most likely be topped with residential apartments or condos and maybe some office space. According to Western and Southern and city officials, there is a lack of parking in the eastern part of downtown. About 1,500 spaces were lost when casino construction began last fall. Business Courier reporter Tom Demoropoulos wrote this story. He joins our U.S. Bank Business Watch's Kelly Leon with more.
Thanks, Brian. Tom, let's talk a little bit about the players in this project. You know, Western Southern is leading this, but talk about the role of the city and possibly the Port Authority as well. Sure.
Western Southern is taking a look at the parking needs in that side of town, and they see some demand, and they're partnering now with the city of Cincinnati, and discussions are in early phases right now, but they're looking at potentially having the city own the garage or the Port Authority owning the garage and then leasing it back to Western and Southern.
But they're really pushing this because they need the parking?
Not only does Western and Southern have some demand for parking, but they see office users in that part of town need more garage spaces close to the office buildings. There's about 6,900 parking spaces in that quadrant of town, and there are only 315 available for monthly parkers.
So in other words, to fill those buildings, they need these parking spaces.
New spaces would definitely make it easier for office brokers to fill up some vacancies in the office spaces downtown.
And they're talking about residential. Could this area be the hot, new, trendy area for downtown living?
I definitely think that with the development of Great American Tower, there's you know, there's a lot of activity going on that's making that part of town attractive.
Yeah.
And the views from there would be pretty amazing.
Yeah, they sure would be. All right, thanks, Tom. Thanks for being here.
Thank you.
Brian?
All right, Kelly, thank you. A story the Business Courier reported last fall is now official. Mahoganys Cafe and Grill is the next tenant to commit to the bank's development along Cincinnati's riverfront. Liz and Trent Rogers currently run a successful upscale soul food restaurant in Hamilton. With $800,000 in loans and grants from the city, the banks will become their second location.
So the opening of Mahoganys actually represents the first investment by an African-American owned business in the banks, and that's an applause line.
The announcement follows some bad news for the banks. 3 Freedom Way businesses pulled out last month, leaving most of that block unleased. Mahoganys expects to open in late spring, joining Holy Grail, Johnny Rockets, and if all goes as planned, Toby Keith's I Love This Bar and Grill, and Moorline Lager House, which should be both open by the end of next month. Well, getting to the banks via streetcar is still a hot topic of debate. The city of Cincinnati has issued $15 million in bond anticipation notes for the proposed streetcar project, bringing to nearly $25 million the amount borrowed against the city treasury. The city says it's expected that all of the notes will be paid back with proceeds from a streetcar bond issue in the spring. Cincinnati City Council authorized bond issues totaling $64 million for the streetcar project in 2010. Critics of the streetcar issue question the increased borrowing, saying too many issues remain unresolved, including moving Duke Energy lines, as the Business Courier has reported. Last week, council members Charlie Winburn and Chris Smitherman scheduled a special council meeting for January 27th to talk about the cost of moving the lines. Duke estimates the price tag at $20 million. The question is, who will pay for this work? Cincinnati accounting firm Vaughn Mansell Company goes to trial next month over its audits of a now bankrupt Chicago client. Now the creditors of that client are looking at what assets would be available to pay a court judgment if Vaughn Mansell loses the case. One creditor suing Vaughn Mansell in Hamilton County claims Vaughn Mansell has said it may seek bankruptcy protection. 3 creditors are suing Vaughn Mansell, alleging its audits should have uncovered financial irregularities at Chicago-based equipment acquisition resources. As the Business Courier reported in August, the creditors claim more than $50 million in damages. Some local bankers and businessmen have teamed up to create a firm that plans to invest millions of dollars in community banks. The downtown-based Community Bank Improvement Group, also known as CBIG, wants to help community banks survive. CBIG is drawing on the experience of Jack Kuntz, who has spent 40 years in banking and once ran Franklin Savings and Loan. He says community banks are a necessary part of America and they need more investment capital.
See an opportunity for financial gain. So we're philanthropic in a way, but we're also capitalists. So we're philanthropic capitalists, if that's a phrase, and we're going to do well by doing good.
Kuntz said his CBIG will have between $75 million and $100 million to invest. He would not identify the investors. The bioscience industry is up 20% in the state of Ohio in this last decade and still looking to fill jobs. Cincinnati State is one of the Ohio schools that received part of a $5 million grant 2 years ago to help students get the skills they need to work in bioscience. That grant covers the cost of class tuition at several community colleges throughout the state of Ohio.
Something like 200 have completed training, and we've placed 100 in employment. And the employers love these individuals. These individuals have got the skills that they're looking for.
The ultimate goal is to prepare 700 people for bioscience industry jobs by next year. A Loveland-based company may be on the verge of becoming a world leader in the electric car industry. AMP Electric Vehicles here in Blue Ash is working on a new Jeep Wrangler conversion and an ambitious plan to sell cars in Iceland. It also announced this week that Mercedes-Benz of Cincinnati will be the first dealer of its products. But here's the tricky part. Keeping the company operating until revenue starts rolling in means a fundraising treadmill for this 5-year-old firm. Selling electric vehicles takes a lot of convincing and marketing to consumers who want to know they're not sacrificing comfort and safety to go electric. The Business Courier needs your help identifying Greater Cincinnati's fastest growing companies. We call it Fast 55. To be eligible for recognition as a Fast 55 company, a company must meet the following criteria: independent, for-profit, and privately held, headquartered in the 17-county, 3-state Greater Cincinnati region, have a 3-year operating history and an average of at least $1 million in sales for the 3 most recent years. To submit your 2012 Fast 55 nomination, please visit bizjournals.com/Cincinnati/nomination/1791, or easier, you can just contact Lisa Benson at lisabenson@bizjournals.com. Nomination deadline for Fast 55 is February 29th. Up next on U.S. Bank Business Watch, will we be able to watch the Bengals on TV next season even if they don't sell out their home games? And is online poker coming to Ohio? We'll tell you who's talking about it and why. Some news you may have missed if you're not reading the Business Courier online every day. Word from Ohio Senator Sherrod Brown that the Federal Communications Commission plans to reconsider the NFL blackout rule, prohibiting local TV to broadcast games that do not sell out. Brown made the request to the FCC in part because of the Cincinnati Bengals. The Bengals failed to sell out 6 of their 8 regular season home games this season, meaning we couldn't watch them on TV. We'll keep you posted. Diversipac, a manufacturing plant that makes packaging products, will close its plant in Monroe on March 5th. That closing means the loss of 173 jobs. Diversipac is based in Commack, New York, and also has regional locations in Batavia and Cincinnati. Add Ohio to the list of states exploring internet gambling thanks to a recent U.S. Department of Justice decision that could pave the way for states to launch everything from poker to lotteries to progressive slots. The ruling says the Wire Act, which shut down all forms of internet gambling in the U.S., only applies to sports betting. As a result, many observers have predicted an explosion of internet gambling in 2012. The interim director of the Ohio Lottery confirmed Ohio is jumping on that exploration bandwagon. So what would you rank as Cincinnati's top fine dining restaurants? One of the nation's top foodie websites, Urban Spoon, took a look at customer reviews. It came up with the top 10 Cincinnati fine dining spots. You can check our website to see all of them, but here are the top 5. Number 1, Jeff Ruby's, the Precinct in Columbia, Tusculum. Boca, currently in Oakley, but moving to the old Masonette space downtown. Jeff Ruby's Steakhouse downtown. Buena Braza downtown, and Nicola's, number 5, a great Italian restaurant in Over the Rhine. And we know most likely you didn't miss this, but it bears repeating this morning. Congratulations to Barry Larkin, named to the Major League Baseball Hall of Fame last week. Barry Larkin is a Cincinnati native. He's a graduate of Moeller High School, and he was the Reds shortstop for 19 seasons. He gave us a lot of great afternoons. He was elected with 86% of the vote, a great honor for Barry Larkin, his family, the Reds, and of course, our city. With the Iowa caucus and the New Hampshire primary now behind us, our primary election season is in full swing in this year 2012. In this morning's U.S. Bank Economic 360, U.S. Bank Senior Portfolio Manager Mike Denneman is in to talk about the election and the economy. So with 2012 being an election year, this really kind of complicates an already fairly complex situation, doesn't it?
Absolutely. The market seemingly has quite a bit on its plate already. So just to put the election into that mix really adds to it. So it's important to remember it's a two-way street, though. So certainly the election is going to impact what happens with the economy and the markets. But on the flip side, it's going to be the markets and the economy having a large influence on how the election turns out.
All right, Mike, let's look at both sides of this coin. First of all, what does the election, what kind of an impact does that have on the economy?
Well, you can see that over time, patterns have formed based on how the presidential cycle's going. So we've seen that stocks typically perform best in the third year of a president's term, but pretty close on the heels is the fourth year or the election year. So that would seem to indicate that 2012 could be a pretty good year for the markets. But we can break that down even further and look within an election year. If we go quarter by quarter, what we find is that historically, again, and we look at the graphic here, you can see that the first portion of the year is really fairly lackluster. It's not until we get nearer to the election that stocks really start to take off. So the third quarter historically has been the strongest quarter in an election year, and then the fourth quarter has been pretty strong as well.
Isn't there a bit of uncertainty over the election among investors?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
All right, let's look at the flip side. How does the economy then affect the election?
Sure, and obviously there's a lot of influence there, and I think perhaps even more so in 2012 with a lot of unanswered questions. So a couple of items that we're paying close attention to include unemployment, of course. Since World War II, no sitting president has been reelected in a year in which the unemployment rate has been rising. Well, we're all aware that unemployment is relatively high right now, but the trend has actually been for unemployment to be falling. So that would seem to indicate that the president would have an easier time being reelected this fall. On the other hand, another measure we watch closely is consumer confidence. No sitting president has been reelected when that measure has been below 90. Right now it stands at about 70, so that's well below that level of typical re-election. So that would seem to indicate that the president might have a more difficult time being elected. So really there's a lot going on out there right now. It's very exciting, and we're anxious to see how it plays out as we move closer to the election.
Yeah, I think exciting is a great term there, especially for investors, and of course we'll be watching that situation with you. Thank you, Mike. Sure. Well, still to come on U.S. Bank Business Watch this morning, an update on 3 ambitious goals 2 years later for our community. Are we headed in the right direction, or are we moving backwards? And congratulations to Katie Crossan, another of our 40 Under 40 honorees. In this morning's Business Insight, Agenda 360. In 2009, Agenda 360, backed by the Cincinnati USA Regional Chamber, set specific goals to make our region more competitive. Agenda 360 was created over nearly 2 years with the help of more than 7,000 people. Its three main goals are to create 200,000 net new jobs by 2020, have 150,000 additional 20 to 34-year-olds in the region's workforce, and ensure that 90% of the labor force is gainfully employed. 2 years after the action plan was implemented, statistics show we have lost ground on every major goal. Greater Cincinnati has lost 61,800 jobs. We have 20,000 fewer young professionals, and a growing number of local residents are too poor to support themselves and their families. Well, despite the gloomy statistics, local civic and business leaders predict a brighter future. The Agenda 360 plan was aggressive when it was established in 2009, but the business and civic leaders behind it had no idea just how bad the economy would get. Mary Stegman is the executive director of Agenda 360 and joins Business Courier publisher Jamie Smith with more.
Thanks, Mary. Thanks for being with us today.
Oh, you're more than welcome.
So despite the economic situation of 2009 and even in 2010, Agenda 360 has decided to stay with these very optimistic goals. Why did you decide to do that?
Two reasons, I think. One is that from the very beginning we had tremendous community support for the work that we were doing and the goals that we set. So to dial them back at this point, and in 2012, when we have a 2020 timeline, seems premature to me and to all the partners that we work with. We think that we've gotten through the worst of the economic downturn. There are some signs of life here, that things are turning around, so that also gives us hope that we can eventually reach those very ambitious goals.
Good, it makes sense. Well, tell me a little bit about the region's political and corporate leaders. I mean, we have some pretty big power players that are in this game.
You know, when we look at the city historically, I think, and in this region in general, we've always had strong leadership, but I really do believe that at this point in our history, we've never had a stronger bench. You look at the corporate leadership, you look at the great work that people like Bob McDonald from Procter and Jim Anderson, who ran Children so successfully for so many years, are doing right now to help us figure out how do we generate more innovation in this region? How do we draw more new young companies and entrepreneurs to Greater Cincinnati and Northern Kentucky? The corporate strength is phenomenal. And then we look at the civic sphere, and we look at the kind of leadership we have at organizations like the Greater Cincinnati Foundation and United Way and others. And when you bring all that together, you end up with a tremendous coterie of leaders, all of whom are tremendously committed to making us a better region.
Right. And I think in anything, they are such, those names, the names alone of McDonald and Jim Anderson, I mean, they bring so much power with them that I think that's going to bring a lot of other people that want to get on board as well.
Well, I think that's absolutely right, Jamie. And in fact, it would be disrespectful for us not to talk about the fact that those are the bold-faced names, but the work of Agenda 360, the work of our partners, Vision 2015 in Northern Kentucky, the United Way, again, is a major partner of ours, but also many, many other organizations throughout the community. All of those people who are leading those organizations and the people who are in the trenches, they're all working to change the story here. And for that, we're really, really grateful.
Well, I think the key right there is partnership. I mean, there are so many partnerships involved, and it's not just one organization going against 3 or 4 other organizations over here, so I appreciate that cooperation. Tell me a little bit more about addressing these 3 specific goals, specifically with job growth. I know they're talking a lot about industry clusters. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, well, I'm delighted because I'm certainly not a job growth expert, but I sit just down the row from our folks at the Partnership for Greater Cincinnati, which is also part of the Chamber, and they have fully embraced those ambitious job goals in Agenda 360, and they've also developed a new strategy for tackling economic development here in our region that focuses on industry clusters where we already have strength or where we know that we have huge potential for growth. And by doing that, we expect to grow more companies that are already here, attract new companies to the region, and again, bring in those entrepreneurs who will start those young companies that are the primary source of new jobs.
Well, don't you think that goal also helps with the next one about attracting young professionals? I mean, the more you get into innovation and technology, it just seems like that's the reason people leave here. You know, they want to go find those jobs.
You know, it's funny you say that because we're actually working to figure out why do people leave. But because we know that some of them do, but you know what happens? They come back.
Yeah.
We call them boomerangs.
Yeah.
And we think that what we've learned in the last year is that many of our homegrown young professionals love this region. They love it.
Yeah.
And they know that they will be back. So maybe we need to let them fly away for a little bit before they can fully appreciate what this region has to offer them over a lifetime. But you're absolutely right that entrepreneurial efforts are a major source of attraction for that sort of much vaunted creative class that we're all trying to attract.
Oh, that's great. That's great. I talked recently with one of the new city council members, and he talked about the same thing, the boomerang effect, and how if we can show the people that have left what changes have gone on, then we'll be sure to get them back. So.
Absolutely, and if you look around, we're already seeing evidence of that. So many of the great things that are happening here right now are being led by young professionals.
That's great.
Look at Strive. Greg Landsman came back to Cincinnati to do that work. Look at Partners for a Competitive Workforce, our workforce training arm. Ross Meyer is doing a phenomenal job with that.
That's great.
And there's so many more that I could cite.
I'm sure. Well, thank you so much for being here, and we wish you a lot of luck in this initiative.
You're welcome, Jamie. Thanks so much for having me.
Back to you.
All right, thanks, Jamie. Stay with Local 12 all morning. CBS Sunday Morning is next, followed by Face the Nation at 10:30 and Local 12 Newsmakers with Dan Hurley at 11. This week, Dan talks with Laura Brunner, the new president of the Port of Greater Cincinnati Development Authority. That's Local 12 Newsmakers right here at 11. Thanks for joining us this morning for U.S. Bank Business Watch. We'll be back next Sunday and every Sunday morning at 8:30 here on Local 12. For more business news all week long, visit the Business Courier online and sign up for our daily emails. Our address is CincinnatiBusinessCourier.com. And to watch this program online, go to our website, scroll about 1/3 of the way down to Inside the Business Courier and click on Business Watch. This program will be posted on our website by Monday afternoon. I'm Brian Patrick. Thanks for joining us for this morning's U.S. Bank Business Watch. Have a great Sunday and a good week.